Welcome to Makers International, a podcast of makers from around the world, talking with makers from around the world. Here's Jamie Page, Steve Twidell, Chris Cute, and now your host, Richard Morley.
Hello. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good times, whatever time it is, wherever you're listening. Joined with me, as always, Mr. Chris Cute.
How you doing?
Mr. Steve Twidell.
Hello.
And our, I was going to say good friend, but he's everybody's friend, Jamie Page.
Hello.
Oh, puke.
It's kind of a little letdown there. I was expecting something bigger, Jamie, but I don't know why I should.
Can't get much bigger than me.
Oh,
Hey,
he's modest too. Look at that.
ladies present.
I was going to say, take that how you will, but we will have none of that this evening.
I meant wide.
We have ladies present with us, so let's not go down that road. This week, joining us, our very special guest is joining us all the way from Slap Stuff Together. I won't say the location of that because it's a very big country, and I don't know exactly whereabouts you're from, Heidi. But Heidi Jacobs, how you doing, Heidi?
Hi, I'm good. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. That's
east side of the nation.
That way. I don't know. My English is bad enough, let alone my US. So.
It's to your west, Richard, but people in California, it's to the east.
I was going to say somewhere between the east coast of the US and the west coast, somewhere
closer to the east coast.
Yeah, but still between the two, so it's good enough for me. It's close enough.
Oh, only we could confuse that. I mean, jeez.
Yeah, Richard pointing across his living room is really good for iPod land.
Which way?
Did he go?
So, as always, as I'm sure, hopefully you've at least listened to a couple of the episodes in the past. You've got a vague idea what the sort of the format is. So, just very quickly, Heidi, I'll be back with you in just 1 second. We're just going to get away with a few kind of housekeeping bits, and then we'll be right back. So, please don't run off, not just yet. We've got an hour to fill yet. So
this is your last chance. This is your last chance, Heidi.
Absolutely. So just like last week, because I think it went down fairly well. I'm going to thank all our commenters and listeners over on the YouTubes and also on SoundCloud to say thank you if you're listening on whatever platform it is. But I'm going to do another shout out for our live audience as well. Just randomly down the list, if I miss you out, I do apologise. But we've got Wayne the Wood Turner, Rubio Arts, Peter Miller, Jamie. What are you doing in the chat? Oh dear, it's done. Heidi, you're in the chat as well. How does that work? Now you're really confusing me. Annabee's Workshop, AHB Spoke, Cat's out there, Dan Gamble's out there, and Harnell Media, and I'm sure there's other people as well. So big welcome to all those live listeners. Big welcome to those people listening kind of in the future as it is for us. But yeah, that's all good. As always, this podcast is brought to you in part by our sponsors, Yorkshire Grit.
Chad over at Mancrafting. And also Pam from Highland Boxes. So if you would like to find out more about our sponsors, then please do head on over to our website, makersinternationalpodcast.com/sponsors. And Jamie puts all the information on there and makes sure it's all up to date and stuff like that. So that's that.
And everybody thought that you knew that off by heart, Richard. You've just completely faffed it up now for everyone.
Yeah, but I'm not too proud to admit it or even care. So that's all good. Chris, do we have any random list of questions from the week?
We do. And let's let it be known that you guys chose this one. This is from Jim Dockrell. Jim Dockrell's question is, boys, ladies, he says, I'm oversexed. My wife is undersexed. His question is, should they move to Middlesex?
No. Stay in Canada.
Stay in Canada. That was his question. I mean, I gave these guys a choice. I said, you've got three. Give me which one. You said number 3. That was number 3.
Yeah, bearing in mind,
I remember this question, and there's actually a Middlesex in Canada as well.
There's in Pennsylvania as well. There's also an intercourse.
Hello.
Hey.
And I thought it was going to be a nice family show tonight.
What's the tax rate there, I wonder? They want more than their 6%. Trust me. All right. Well, Jim, I guess the answer is no. Stay where you are.
Is there a
Please.
place called Marry Sex? Because there's no such. Yeah. Anyway, we won't go
There's
there.
a place in
that-
France called Brest.
That was the highly, in-depth question we had this week, Richardson. But maybe next
Thanks,
week.
Jim.
Maybe next week we'll
Awesome
fare
question.
better.
Well, it certainly fits the criteria of random. So, and obviously from a listener as well. I think we need to
I'm
kind of.
really happy I chose Jim now.
It was you that chose Jim, actually, yes. So Anyway, I think we should move swiftly on away from that, and hopefully Chris can edit that out as well. Heidi, save us. I'm going to be brutally honest, as I always am with the guests that I actually don't know that well, or in your case, it's not that well, not as in some guests, it's like not at all. You are actually, I believe, one half of a kind of a duo. Yes, one of half is two. That would be a duo. And you are predominantly into ceramics and pottery and.
Yeah, I mean, my husband, he does leather work and woodworking, but he's a very skilled sculptor as well. So he's not, unfamiliar to the medium that I use. I have spent the last couple of years focused primarily on pottery and ceramic art. Previous to that, was doing a lot more digital design and photography, but really wanted to get more into something just a bit more tangible, get my hands a little dirty. And we had a kiln here, so I decided I might try and figure out how to make my own pottery wheel, because pottery wheels are expensive. So a few years ago, I made my own, and then it kind of took off from there.
So you just had a kiln lying. I was expecting you to say, yeah, I sort of got into it because I did it at school, or there was somewhere I could do a class. I genuinely wasn't expecting you to say, we had a kiln just kind of
well,
in the cupboard.
Yeah, I can give you the backstory on why we had the kiln. So, but as I said before, Ben is a very, very talented sculptor, and he was using a material called Sculpey clay, which is a polymer clay. It's very expensive, and he was making pretty large pieces that it got pretty pricey to make. And in my college education, I attended a small school called Clarion University, and I was a sculpture major. That was my specific vocation study. And through that training, I had worked with all different kinds of mediums, and clay was one of them. So I brought it up to him, hey, did you ever think about using proper clay? It's cheaper. It's like 30 cents a pound, and all we'd need to find is a kiln. And he was like, never tried it, but totally interested. So I put out a shout on Facebook, like, hey, anybody that has a kiln in the basement that they want to get rid of? And in the United States, in about the 70s and 80s, it was really popular for women to be making ceramic pieces that they'd have these parties and decorate. So they do a lot of slip casting. So there are these molds, they pour the liquid clay into, it sets, they fire it once, and then they paint it with acrylic paints. So you'll find a lot of people have those in their basements.
Right, okay. So literally, I mean, it's not, certainly around here, it's like that's not the sort of thing that people have just kicking around the house,
Yeah.
But it's kind of weird, actually. And the last thing I want to do is kind of disappear off down a little rabbit hole, because we want to find out about yourself. But it does strike me as being almost comical and also at the same time frustrating that these kind of key ingredients, if you will, that allow us to do the things that we like to do, like in your case, a kiln, or for somebody who's getting into metalworking, anvils, or leather presses, they kind of go through these little fashions whereby you can't get them for love nor money. And then 20 years ago, everyone was just throwing them in landfills and getting rid of, and it's always the thing that you're after is the thing that you can't get.
Right.
It's like we live in just behind that drag curve of changing fads, and you obviously picked that up at exactly the right moment, because I'm guessing currently the kilns aren't particularly common to fire, or are they? I don't know.
Well, if you look on like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, there's usually at least one kiln in your vicinity or a potter's wheel. What happens is people take pottery classes, whether it's high school or they do it in college. They take a semester and try it out. And they really like it, but the ratio of failure to success when it comes to pottery is so difficult that a lot of people don't stick with it, and it's not for the faint of heart. I can tell you, like, I've worked on, and just to go back to the example of Ben with his work with the kiln, he did these massive sculptures for, he did probably like 8 sculptures for his first fire. And he put them in the kiln, one exploded and hit all 8, which destroyed all of them. So that's hundreds of hours of work exploded in one firing of the kiln. And if you look at that as like, is it worth my time to experiment with this medium, or do I just stop using it? And that's essentially what he did. He repaired the pieces that he had because they were commission work. He did a fantastic job repairing them, but then he said, this isn't for me. I don't want to put the time and effort into learning how to do this right. Oh, he's just messaged 2 survived. 2 survived out of the 8. But then he had to repair the other ones, and I think 2 were beyond repair. So, I was at a Pirates game, which is a baseball game, a baseball team in Pittsburgh. It's a pro game, and I was sitting, and I'm getting text messages from him. You won't believe what happened, and then he sent pictures, and it was just shattered ceramics all through the kiln. Just some pieces were powder, other pieces were big chunks. I was devastated, and it wasn't even my work. So that kiln stayed downstairs, not operational, for a couple of years before I was able to, start using it with, throwing pottery. And to take it back even further, the reason that I didn't focus on pottery when I was a sculpture major is because I was a pretentious bitch.
I love your honesty. I love your honesty.
I was looking at it like, I didn't like the idea of functional art. I thought, what's the point? I want to do big, large sculptures that are in the round, you experience through smell, touch, sound, everything. I wanted my pieces to just be an experience and not, drinking out of a cup. So I never threw anything until I decided to make my own pottery wheel. And let's just say that was a challenge in and of itself. That took about 2 years for me to get out of my pride zone and ask a professional potter to show me what I was doing wrong.
So I find that quite interesting that you'd say you had no interest in functional art. It was what you just described. So I'm exactly the opposite of that. I look at a picture, a painting that you'd hang on your wall, or some of the stuff that people make in the community, and I can instantly look at it. And I'm sure everybody sat here and everyone listening as well can either they sit on one side or the other of this. You look at those beautiful things, and you instantly appreciate the time and effort that goes into it, the beauty of it, the difficulty in working with whatever the medium is, but have absolutely zero, at the same time, have zero interest in doing that yourself. Yeah. Conversely, as you were at college, and it's amazing, I think, the way that these two sides of basically the same thing join together and can have that kind of conversation that and get along and appreciate both sides of that, and then kind of drift into it. Like, you've come over and actually now I want to do the practical stuff and I want to learn more about it, whereas previously staunchly against. And I guess, Steve, you have a similar thing with the wood turning.
Yeah.
And Chris, the flat work, and Jamie with the scroll. Nobody's got any interest in scroll sawing area. Just pretend they do for Jamie's sake. But I totally get what Jamie does. but I have no interest in standing there for 100 million hours, growing old with a big long beard to get to it. Do you know what I mean? But I find it kind of liberating that you turn around and say that, because I haven't come across many people that have actually just kind of blurted out and said, and just been honest about it, rather than being sort of polite. If that makes sense, you know, because obviously that comes into it as well. You still don't want to offend people.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think it depends on why you want to put all the time and effort into a particular piece too. Because, I mean, you can, and then you can stick it up on your wall and nobody else ever sees it other than yourself and the 50 people that watched your video. But, you know, it depends on whether you've got an audience or customers as well that want to buy your pieces too. Do you know? Because there's a lot of art out there that you just think, why did you even bother spending those thousands of hours doing that when all you've done is put it in your lounge and stuck a lump of glass on it and made it into a coffee table? Nobody else is going to ever see it, you know?
Well,
I suppose
also
it's a self-pride thing as well.
That's kind of the beauty of art as well, isn't it? As well,
It's
the fact that you can then appreciate it, to, you know, just to be there and being. We're all in awe of different things, whether it's a building, structure, a person, a thing on the wall. If you, that's the subjectiveness of art, I guess.
Yeah.
So what made you go from the one state of affairs, shall we say, over to wanting to do the practical stuff?
Well, when I got out of college, I started working for point of sale display companies. So we were doing a lot of consumer feedback work where we were making environments for stores and then trying to figure out what was going to push the consumer to purchase based on experience. And I want to say through that and through like graphic design and everything else, I kind of fell away from the passion of doing something just to do it, and realizing that in order for people to buy in, they needed a story, or they needed to be able to look at something and say, I could use that, or I get something out of that. And it wasn't until then started really getting involved in the maker community that I started looking at my art as product. And I don't want to say like I didn't value what he was making and I didn't value what everyone else was doing, because that's not it at all. It was more of a personal challenge to me that like these pieces that I had in my head in college, I mean, I made a giant environment, a room environment with steel and the smell of hot molten steel, and I had videos cast onto these big steel plates to show videos of steel workers in Pennsylvania, what they were sacrificing, whether it was family time or it was their lives or their physicality. And the whole point was to emphasize what the workers were struggling with. And the university refused to let me show my work. So because I didn't have a bachelor's of fine arts, I didn't have that F in my degree channel, they said I could only show in the Bachelor of Arts group, and therefore I wouldn't get gallery space that I had booked for a year. So I did this huge thing with my partner in my sculpture program, and we weren't allowed to display it. And that crushed me.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that's effectively, I mean, to my mind, certainly, I might be completely going in the wrong direction. That seems to me a complete waste of time. Because
really,
the point of art is that you look at it and you see it. So if you then do it and just close it away and put it in a box and nobody can see it, you might as well have not done it.
Yeah, the dean of the department felt that it would be unfair for 2 Bachelors of Arts majors to receive what a Bachelor's of Fine Arts major should be getting at such a close proximity to their like huge
So what they
exhibition.
what they basically said is you haven't earned that position yet. You haven't earned that spot yet, so we're not going to give it to you. It's a very different culture, Richard. The whole art world compared to
Snobbery.
compared to the maker world that we live in, it operates on a very different basis. And on top of that, when you get into an academic structure of that art world, it becomes even more different. And I know that only because my college I was an arts student myself, but it was a different type of arts. But it does get to be that way, and it's sad because if you want to teach somebody, whether their stuff is good or not, then you got to offer them a place to display it, and if that's what you and your partner wanted to do, Heidi, it was just kind of wrong to say no, you can't do that because you haven't paid the price yet, or whatever the case may be. It's like, well, you know what, if I really haven't paid the price yet, let me put it in there and see how many complaints we get. It's like, I mean, but then
the owner's idea was a great idea. She said you should have put it on the hood of the dean's car. That would have been a great place to display it.
Oh man. Well, we ended up having to show our work in the bachelor's, like the regular bachelor's of arts group. And that meant that we had to hurry up and redo our curriculum vitas. We had to make a bunch of art to display that we weren't prepared for, that didn't really voice what we'd been spending the last 4 or 5 years developing. So I made this giant painting that was sky, and I had black sheep floating in the sky, and it just said BA, 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 BA floating all over it to just kind of, say, thank you. I understand that I'm a black sheep. I get it. And so that kind of like, that experience and then walking away from the fine arts world for a bit and working in commercial art, and then seeing the maker community really change something in me, where it was like these pretentious people that didn't believe in all the hard work that I did and didn't see what I was trying to do and what my partner was trying to do too. It was gut-wrenching and terrible. And then I get into the commercial world where it's very competitive. It's very, very strict about brand identity and what you're trying to get and pushing the consumer. And that psychology of art that I learned through fine arts was really great for that. And then when Ben started with the maker community and I started seeing like little tidbits of like people being encouraged to be creative, not because the expression was good for the fine arts community, but because the expression was good for the individual, was just mind-blowing. And I had been doing a little bit of pottery on my own just for me. And Ben was like, you should really share this with the community. And I was dead set on no, because I didn't want that Bachelor of Art experience in this community. It wasn't that I was terrified, it was that I was convinced that because pottery isn't something that's part of this community and talked about very often, I was convinced that I would be rejected.
Oh no,
and
no.
Happily, I was wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because the very first day I posted something, it was like, what? What is this?
That's awesome.
That's what I mean. We always talk about the fact that everyone is so welcoming in the community and all the rest of it. It does get to the point of, be honest, and I know people are going to hate me for saying this. Personally, I think there is a lot of, I mean, genuinely, it's a great place, and people are, like you said, they're always encouraging. But we do need to be mindful that it is the real world, and sometimes it's you've got to put that reality bit on it as well. But to reinforce what you said about being worried about not being accepted because your medium is clay. Kat had exactly the same reservations last year before Maker Central, because her medium is yarn, sheep wool stuff. And she thought she was going into a wood/metal area and that people wouldn't be interested, and they'd be like, oh, that's nice, yeah, well, it's not wood, so we're not interested. And there she is at 2 o'clock in the morning having a laugh with Heath Knuckles and Steve and Peter Brown and Peter Brown's wife and all these people that she never met and didn't know, and they were just other people, but they were genuinely interested in the making for the sake of making, rather than the material or the tools that you use. And that's, I think, where the reality of the personality comes out, because nobody cares what you make or how you make it or to really what standard. It's the fact that you share that commonality of the will to create something out of something else.
I absolutely agree.
And that's kind of liberating, because it completely nullifies that sort of professional, pretentious, fine arts. And this is what I always am hilariously judgmental about art, because when somebody says, "Oh, I'm into fine art," it's like, well, hang on a minute, you're in a corner of existence which is purely subjective. So I'll judge whether I think that's fine, if you don't mind. And I think everybody needs that reality check,
Yeah.
Particularly those people at that university, by all accounts.
Well,
Yeah.
that's probably not going to. That whole genre, Richard, has been like that for hundreds of years, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
I'm sure it's not.
There's a classic story about an artist named Duchamp, who really hated the culture of fine arts.
Yeah. He
hated the judgmentalness of who gets in galleries, who gets their work sold, who gets, all of the amazing opportunities thrown at them. It was mainly based on a popularity contest, not really anything else. So he got invited to show in a gallery. He took a urinal, put his signature on it, and hung it on the wall. That it was a statement. He said, what makes what this craftsperson did to make this urinal any worse than some masterful piece of artwork? What makes it any worse? Or he automatically took that urinal and gave it more value by putting it in a gallery than it was going to have in a bathroom wall. So there's constantly people that push that ideal and that envelope a lot in just about any kind of environment. You're talking science, mathematics, literature, art. It's across the board. It's not just like the wild people of the maker community. But I did want to make a point of saying that pottery has all different types of forms. Ceramic arts has all different, they have the fine art end, where you're talking about those same people that are like, oh, if you did not pull that handle, then it is not proper. If you used an extruder, how dare you? But then there are the people like Warren McKenzie, who just passed away this year, who wanted to make functional art available to anyone who had enough funds to pay for it. So he never overpriced his work. He was very, very interested in sharing his experience, teaching people about it, and making sure that anybody who wanted one of his pieces of work could afford it. And he's got a whole journal that's specific to that. And the more that I understood his works and what he was doing, the more that I felt like, oh, there's my tribe. That's what I've been looking for my entire art career.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at anything that has the word fine in front of it, fine art, fine food,
fine woodworking,
but anything that has fine in front of it, it's taking you to the next level of, in my opinion, of snobbery. Even in the wood turning world, you've got galleries that are taking in pieces from around the world, and they're buying pieces. And when you look at them, and when I look at them, I think, if I wanted to, I could do that. I could make that, and I could make it look just as nice as it does as the piece that they have. But I don't want to, because there's thousands of them out there. It's nothing different to anything that I'm seeing across Google or anywhere. It's just because that one piece was picked up before the other 20,000 that followed it. That's the only difference in it. And that I think any art that's different is pretty amazing, because not only have you managed to master your skill, but you've also been able to add your own little signature to it and make it your own. And that's kind of what I'm about, is kind of not just following the herd and just standing out. And I think, in my opinion, fine art is your own best piece that you can make, and feck the snobs, to be honest.
Kind
I
of like Banksy of the pottery world.
Rasher of the art world, yeah.
I like the way you put that, Steve, in so much as it is kind of the best the best that you do, the best that you can.
Yes.
It's to take it into the sports world.
Yes.
It's, you know, it's personal best, because
Yeah.
I think if you talk to a lot of kind of, you know, athletes, or sports people, whether they're, you know, looking to lose a few pounds so they go out for a run once a week, or they jog to work or cycle to work, they put in their own level of effort, and they're proud of knocking that second off the commute to work, or the run around the park, or whatever it is. Whereas if you then put that into the professional end of the spectrum, you can have a fantastic game but still only put 80% in. You know, you can get a professional sportsman, only puts in 80%, but the team still wins the game. And that's not the same as somebody who just does it for shits and giggles, effectively, as a hobby, and they put absolutely everything into it, and then they're proud at the end.
Well, that leads me into a question I wanted to ask Heidi, because Heidi, you went to, when you were in school, and you were trying to, you wanted to make these creations that could be observed in the round, and just kind of very artistic pieces, and that's where your motivation was. How do you transition that kind of motivation into what you're doing now? And I know that you spoke a little bit about it when you said that you got into the art world when you were working on a commercial basis, but now you're looking at the art that you do, and you realize that, yes, you still want to do, you know, your thing, but now I've got to make my thing sellable to the general public. How did that transition go for you? And I mean, because I know a lot of people that I've worked with in the art world that feel like they're why do you say this? They feel they're betraying themselves by becoming commercial.
Sell out.
And then you've got to talk them out of that and let them know that they're not, first of all, they're not doing that. All they're trying to do is make a friggin' living. And like Richard said, hello, at some point in time, this has got to become real life. But I mean, how did you make that transition? Because you're selling your pottery now, right?
Yeah, actually, like in the last couple of weeks, I just started doing wholesale with storefronts. So
awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome.
So I think the transition actually happened very quickly. I graduated in 2004 from the art program, and I quickly realized that gallery jobs were very difficult to come by. And I loved situating other people's artwork. I loved interior design. I loved large pieces, but I knew that it was going to take me a long time to be able to have my own studio space to work in that scale. And I didn't think that I was that interested in apprenticing under someone. So I had to change my attitude about things to figure out what I could make a living doing. And when I looked at what I had done in college and looked at career opportunities, the best thing that I could do to fit what I had learned was to look for places that designed point of sale and window treatments for storefronts. Mm-hmm. So that was the first step in the transition. And in that, I talked to a lot of graphic designers. I mean, you've talked to Al before. He's in it. He's in the design world where he's having to like commercialize everything for large brands. And it can be soul destroying because you kind of feel like there's a joke among us that are in the print ends that all we do is make garbage. We fill landfills. And that can be very demoralizing if that's all you're thinking about. Like you're spending hours and hours and hours trying to develop this one thing that's maybe going to last for 6 months on shelf, and then it changes to something else. So that quickly can change your perspective on your art value.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to find things for yourself in your downtime. So that downtime may only be, 4 hours in the evening before you go to bed. So you write a song. So I got really involved in writing music for probably, 8 or 9 years. And then I got into photography and I loved it. And that became a chore because then everybody wanted me to take wedding photos. And that's like the worst experience in the world.
That is the worst gig in the world. My father was a professional photographer. And he says, that is the worst gig in the world. You do it because you want the money, but it's not because you're having a good time.
No.
Oh, man.
No. So this year, this past year, 2018, I did the least weddings that I've ever done. I assisted in most of them instead of leading them. And I really turned my attention towards my pottery. And pottery for me, the steps of doing it, the process is the meditation. And that's the outlet. It's not the final product. It can't be the final product because you can put 9 pieces in a kiln and they can all explode. You cannot use that as your final, this feels good. Because when that happens, then the feel good feels like a nightmare.
Yeah.
So you have to enjoy every step of the process, whether you're wedging your clay, which you're pushing all the air bubbles out. Like when you knead dough and you don't want the dough to rise unevenly, you have to knead all the air out. So that's what you do when you wedge clay so that you can throw it and center it. The practice of centering, the breathing, the positioning, and everything is like yoga. You're positioning your body so that you use your own weight to command the clay to go the direction that you want, to get it into place. The moment when that ball of clay suddenly gets centered and it's not fighting you anymore is a release and so calming. And it's like the world just comes into place and then you move on to like
the clouds part, the angels sing. It's just one
yeah, exactly. it's like it's a moment of zen that you're like, oh, I'm here with this piece. What do you want to be? And sometimes when you're doing production work, it's not as fun. But if you just keep focusing on the process and the steps, it becomes very cathartic. And for me, my evenings can be a bit chaotic because Ben's at work with and I'm home with Carver, and I'm trying to get some stuff done in the studio, and Carver's in here like madman, naked, or oh, mommy, poo poo. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, great, awesome, thanks, Al. That's so awesome.
And I thought that was play.
Yeah, that. Don't put that there. Don't put that in the reclaim, please.
No.
So when you're doing your kind of production or kind of client work, does that kind of up the ante in terms of it's now very serious? Because if these explode in the kiln, that's a whole lot of time wasted or money wasted. I mean, I used to be quite a history buff to do with the kind of Industrial Revolution, kind of late 1800s, early
1900s, right?
18 from 19, all the rest of it. And people like Wedgwood and Stoke-on-Trent, all those kind of big commercial pottery places, and the fact that literally businesses could go completely under based on a kiln going wrong. Things being burnt. So I mean, obviously that's a much bigger scale than doing a dozen of something for somebody. But do you get that same level of like, this is real, this could be bad, not necessarily bankruptcy bad, but I've now got to go back to them.
I can miss deadline.
Yeah. I mean, do you get that kind of pressure and anxiety, or is it just like,
I've been through difficult moments. But I think if you can compartmentalize everything and just kind of like, okay, this worked out, thank God. Okay, now this worked out, thank God. And if you can take the highlights of the process as you go, you really feed yourself that way. But as far as like a catastrophe in the kiln. It's always on my mind. It's always a possibility. It's always like, I always have a hard time sleeping the night I'm waiting to open a kiln. Like last night was very difficult for me because that had, 12 pieces of client work and 2 pieces of experimental. And I try to make sure that the shelves are separated very succinctly. So like client work is on one level, experimental work is on another level, other client work is on another level. So if one piece fails and explodes and hits other pieces, it may only affect one shelf. But it's kind of one of those things where you have to be very transparent with your customers. Like this could be 2 weeks or it could be 4 weeks. I'll do my best to give it to you in the 2 weeks, but I will keep you updated as things happen in the process. So as early as the greenware drying, I'm looking to my left because I have a whole shelf of greenware that's drying right now. If something dries unevenly, it can crack and then it's no longer usable. So you have to make sure that you're doing your steps properly. And the more practice that you have, the less fails you have in each step of the process. So you become more comfortable with your kiln loads because you know that you did the right thing at each step of the process. So if I'm being experimental, like with a mug for this one for Brett, this was an experiment. I never have thrown this shape before. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to explode. I didn't know if it was going to crack on the shelf. I lost 2 very similar to this because the handles cracked because they dried too quickly. So those are the things that's what product development is for. You're testing things to make sure that they work. Your glaze development, your glaze testing, your chemistry work, all of that builds into your confidence level. And if you're not doing your due diligence where you need to be, then you're going to have more problems than what you need. And my pottery teacher told me that everything can be a salt pinch, which means like when you're throwing on the wheel and you screw up, everything can be used for something. Don't take failure so seriously. And I've just tried to keep that at the front of my mind instead of focusing on, man, all 8 pieces could explode.
Yeah, but I think, you have to have those. And honestly, when you have those failures, you're not immediately thinking this, okay? But you actually have to have those failures to appreciate and gain the confidence that you eventually will attain. I mean, you have to have those kind of failures to appreciate the successes. If you're honest with yourself, and when you've got a kiln full of pottery and every piece just freaking blew up, trust me, you're not thinking, "Oh boy, there's my life lesson. I'm so happy." I mean, you're not thinking that.
No, you cry.
But in the long run, when you look back on it and you all of a sudden have that confidence and like, now I can put stuff in there and not worry about it. But it took me those failures in order to get to the point where I am right now. And I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I mean, it's almost because of that, right?
Yeah. I think, I don't know if any of you, it was very early on in my maker community relationship, but I had a full load of nerd mugs. I'd been working for about 6 months to fill the kiln because I wasn't throwing as often as I am now. 6 months of work. I put it in for a bisque fire. And the way that my kiln works is there's what's called a cone sitter tube. It has these 2 prongs that stick out and this prong that is this way. And it collapses, and so you put a cone in between those 3 prongs. And when it reaches temperature, that cone slopes or slumps over the bottom thing, and these 2 fall down, which hits a mechanism that shuts the kiln off. So that tells your kiln that it's reached temperature and needs to cool down. Unfortunately, the 6 months of pottery that was in there, the kiln overfired, which means the cone never did its job. It reached temperatures that were probably like a cone 12, which I was shooting for a cone 5 or cone 6. So the temperature was about double what it needed to be. And all of my pieces blistered and fused together.
Oh.
My shelves, which are $35 a piece, went like straight and then warped. Everything was, it was a total loss. 6 months of work, $30 shelves. I mean, there were three shelves in there. The cone had fallen into the cone tube, so the kiln was broken.
Oh dear.
I opened the kiln right before I was going to work, and
It looks as if it still hurts too, Heidi.
Oh, it's very painful to relive.
Yeah.
We've got a few questions from out in the chat. We've got a question from PJ Galati. He says, "How many different types of clay have you experimented with, and what are the differences?"
Well, there could be a whole dissertation on clay bodies. I have worked with 4 different clays, excluding polymer clay. I'll just focus on water-based. So I've worked with like a modeling sculptural clay that's low fire. That's what most people start on in school. It fires at a cone 04 or 05. It fires to like a gray color when it's bisque, and then white when it's full fired. I have worked with 2 different types of throwing clays. One is very, very smooth and doesn't have any sand or grit in it, so it doesn't hold very well, which I learned a couple of weeks ago when I tried to make a yarn bowl out of it. It went, it just wouldn't hold up after I cut the wall. And then the one that I most currently use is a tan clay. It's got some sparkle kind of stuff in it. It's very gritty. It's hard to throw with, but it makes for a really, really good clay for mugs and smaller vessels. So it's kind of what my go-to. It's very, very elastic. So there's a lot of give to it when I throw, but it has a good bit of memory. So when it dries, it sometimes goes back into those weird shapes that I don't necessarily want. And then there's porcelain. I've worked in porcelain before. It's mean. I don't like it.
It's mean porcelain.
It's mean. It takes a lot more energy to fire it to temperature. It's not very forgiving. It's very pretty, but it's not. It's not a clay body that I prefer to work in. I've seen people do some amazing work with it. They make these pieces that look like they were cakes, you know, like with the fondant, and they're just incredible. But it's not a. I like the dug out of the earth in Pennsylvania clay.
There you go. There you go. What else you got, Jamie?
Yeah. There's another one from Anna B. She says, have you ever taken classes, or do you know what you know by just trying everything out?
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit. I studied sculpture, so I knew how clay worked in college, but I hadn't thrown. I built a pottery wheel in 2013. I threw a little bit with that, but I was using the wrong clay. I was using a terrible technique. And then finally, I did take a class from a local potter that owned a little company called Four Sisters Ceramics. And they changed my life. Like literally, they changed it. Just by like 2 or 3 classes with them, sitting with me, giving me pointers. I was able to bring it home and apply what I had learned, and just through repetition and a lot of YouTube videos. There are a lot of really good ceramics artists on YouTube that are showing their techniques.
Mm-hmm. A question from Mackenzie Relu. Says, what projects, goals, experiments is Heidi looking forward to?
Oh,
wow. I feel like
becoming successful in selling my stuff. There you go.
Yeah, I had goals that already were. I had goals set for this year that I've already broken through, with being able to sell my works in several storefronts and a couple other things. But as far as like actual work, I want to get more sculptural in my pieces. So I set a goal for myself that every kiln load I do at least one piece that has a technique I've never tried before. And so today's kiln unload had the mug for Brett from Skull and Spade, which has a glazing technique that I've never used before and a throwing technique. So I threw a vessel that looks like almost like a goblet. I created a handle in a form that I've never tried before. And then the glazing technique, you can't really see it. I'm holding this, for those of you that are just listening, I'm holding a mug up. But there's like this celestial kind of glaze treatment on the mug itself. And that was a lot of the firsts for me. Last year was the Izzy mug, which I just culminated and finished in a video and sent Izzy the mug, which turned out pretty good. I'm very happy with.
Yeah, that turned out great.
I've been experimenting with these octopus mugs. If you were part of
Yeah, you have.
Yeah. If you were part of the McKenna fundraiser, there was one on there for that. So I think just fine-tuning what I've already learned in the last year, especially for the clients that I currently have. Every day I get a request for something that I've never done before. Like a couple of weeks ago, I made soap dish or sponge holders. I didn't even know they existed.
Right.
And I tried it, and it turned out great. And 15 people wanted them, so that meant that I could pay for more clay and try more experiments.
Jamie, let me interrupt you real quick because we are running down on time here. But because you just mentioned so many people wanted them, if they don't live in your town and they don't happen to run by one of the storefronts you're selling your wares at, do you have any of your stuff available online that if somebody was interested in wanting a piece of yours, can they go, like, do you have a website that people can go to and look at what you have and then possibly buy something from you? Or is it better just to contact you?
Well, if you're looking for something custom, you can always message me on Instagram with Slap Stuff Together, or you can visit my website at slapstufftogether.com. But we're also on Etsy and with Slap Stuff Together. Pretty much anywhere that you search Slap Stuff Together is how you can contact me or see what I have available. For the most part, a lot of the stuff that I'm getting is like, hey, I saw you did this. Can you do this? And then usually my answer is, haven't tried it, but I will.
Awesome.
Very cool.
And I believe if anybody's looking, there's the links to everything that Heidi and Ben have are down below in the description of this this video and or this audio podcast. So check it out.
Yeah. There's a question from DJ of Socomo Woodwork. He says, Heidi, how critical are you of that scene in Ghost?
Oh God, I knew that question was going to come up.
we were talking about this before we went on the air. It's like we expected that question because we had a little conversation about it before Richard hit the live button. But go ahead, let him have it, Heidi.
Some potters, they embrace that. They put a giant picture of Patrick Swayze behind them at their pottery station and throw with Patrick Swayze behind them. I am not one of those potters.
Maybe we should probably leave it there.
You will not hear me cover Unchained Melody. Let's just put that way. No thanks.
Oh dear. And obviously the substandard question: box or briefs?
None.
Commander. Number 6 on the podcast. Heidi jumps in with the commander. That's my girl.
Yeah.
I love you. Ben, you're a lucky man. You are a lucky man, Mr. Jacobs. Anyway, I love your mentality. That's fantastic.
Well, those potter seats can get very uncomfortable, can't they? So.
Yeah, they can.
So can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
I already know Chris tried to throw in high school. How about you guys? Have you done any throwing or work with clay?
I haven't. There is actually a place near me that does it. So my other half wants to go there at some point and have a go. So I'll probably end up doing it at some point.
I have. Yeah, I went on a tour and I tried it once and I came out with kind of a cup. Yeah, it was all right.
So I haven't done it on a wheel. When I was at primary school, possibly even earlier than that, we used to have like these big metal square trays that we'd all sit round, and we'd get given clay, and we'd kind of make stuff. I remember I made a fish shape. It was like a carp, you know, like you get the on the wall on the plaque.
Yeah,
it was like that, made out of clay, but it was a money box. We had that for ages, and I think it got broken obviously at some point, but made that because we weren't allowed to. We'd just make this clay, and then we'd put it on a shelf, and it would magically reappear hard, and then we'd paint stuff on it, and it would disappear again, and it would magically come back shiny and different colours and stuff like that. Then I got a kind of high school, secondary school, I suppose I was about 12 or 13 maybe. We had an actual art room which was for pottery, and I think there were about half a dozen wheels in there, but again, unless you were doing like the GCSE art, you weren't allowed. No, you can't go near those. They're for the exam students, and it was all very sort of although they were basically these two guys that were high school art teachers, they might
they're for the fine students.
Yeah, basically that's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is.
Yeah.
There were two art rooms. One was for like paintbrushes and paint, and the other one was for clay. But both the art teachers, although they were literally high school art teachers, they may as well have been gallery owners. Because, you know, unless you were doing GC, you weren't even allowed to the nice paints. Like no, you can't. You have to use the water-based paints, like poster paints, literally the finger painting paint. Unless you do GCSE art.
I know how that workshop would have looked if I was a child there.
But the funny thing was, and the last thing I'm going to do is have a dig at the art world. We'll wait until next week actually, because I know the person we've got on next week did actually do a fine arts degree, so we'll rip into him on your behalf, Heidi.
Yes.
all the kids at school that were doing GCSE arts, they used to their badge of honour was like a big clear plastic case that's sort of A2 size with a handle that had all their portfolio in it. They'd carry around. Ugh. Yeah, very not my scene at all.
Heidi, there's no doubt we could probably spend another hour with you. I mean, we really could. I mean, you've been an enjoyable guest, and at some point in time, would you mind coming back?
Absolutely, this has been fun.
Maybe bring that deadbeat of a husband with you next time too? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding with you, bro. I love you, man. I love it. He's bigger than me too. Seriously, I'm sorry.
Because everyone's bigger than you. You're about 4 inches high.
Yeah, my only advantage in this world is I can run. There's no pride in that, but I can do it. Heidi, is there anybody that you want to give a mention to as we wind this thing down? Or anybody out in the community, or somebody that you want us to become aware of that perhaps we're not, that we can go out and check out and see how awesome they are as well?
Sure. Well, I really just want to encourage anybody that's interested in trying pottery to do what Jamie was describing and see if you can find someone locally that has a pottery studio and is open to the public. More than likely, the part of the pottery community that I love so much is that everyone is willing to share their knowledge, and you get back so much in return. So I would say, like, look it up in whatever documents that you like. We have the yellow pages here, or Google it, see if there's someone around you that has a pottery studio that you'd really be interested in working with and having them teach you, because it could be something that opens up a whole new world for you. A whole new world. But for those of you that do turning, pottery isn't that far from what you're doing. It's just, instead of taking material away, you're kind of manipulating it to go out or in. So if you've done turning, it's not that far of a place to go to learn how to do wheel throwing. But as far as shout outs, I would just have to say, like, to all my ladies this week, Anna, Ellen, Soph, love you ladies. You guys are awesome. Pam, keep it going. I'm really enjoying this part of the community and that. So. Got it.
I can do that. Makers ladies. Got it. And there's like,
all the ladies.
Yeah, and you know what? Hey, there's a lot of them out there that are very talented, as are you.
and interestingly as well, the people that you mention are all with different mediums.
Yeah. That's cool, Jamie. Let's just ignore Richard. You got anything for your novel this week?
For you're talking about the famous Jamie's page.
Well, thank God that little jingle's not famous, but yes, that's what I'm talking about. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I've got a couple of things. Now you may see around and about on the socials a channel or a page or whatever, an Instagram account called Craft of the Q, all one word. That is actually the new name of what was once Pete's Bunker Handicrafts.
Oh, cool.
So that's just to inform you that I guess he must have rebranded, because I saw it on my feed and I was like, who's that? And then I went to the YouTube channel and noticed it had Pete's old logo on it. So yeah, just informing everybody that I guess he must have rebranded.
Awesome.
So, Detective Jamie strikes again.
Yeah. The next one is kind of a bit of a shameless plug for us as a podcast.
Oh god, here we go.
Our Instagram page is getting close to 1,000 followers now, so if you wouldn't mind going over and kind of pushing us over,
it would help if I followed us. I'm sorry.
I suppose I should go and like it.
Yeah, and me. The podcast is at makers_international_podcast. There's that. And obviously, last but not least, you got Maker Central coming up in May. For more information on that, you can go to makerscentral.co.uk, not .com. Right.
Yeah.
My shout out. My shout out this week goes to Ken Poon of Moonpire Creations this week for two reasons. One is an incredible turner, and he makes some awesome stuff on his channel. And secondly, and probably more importantly, is I'm sharing a room with Ken in Atlanta, and he's a hell of a lot bigger than me, and I want to get his good Brexit, so he leaves me alone.
Oh, Ken, what have you done? Oh, Lord.
Sucking up to the roomie already. All right. Thank you, Jamie.
So yeah, Ken Moon.
Stephen, what about you, buddy?
I have a shout out to a very well-known wood turner and a really lovely guy, Mr. Chris Fisher, the blind wood turner.
Cheers.
He did a really cool video the other day. I've been looking into how to etch metal myself because my new laser won't do it because it's not strong enough. But there's a few projects I've been thinking of doing. So when this video popped up, I was really glad to see it. And he just shows you how you can etch steel by using simply a 12-volt battery charger and some solution that he made himself out of some vinegar and salt water. And he just does it so simply. A blind guy teaching me how to etch metal. How much more awesome does that get? So Chris Fisher, you demand. Great video. Thank you.
I'm waiting for Chris to show me how to use a Lichtenberg machine.
No, Jesus, you guys just want to die, don't you? My shout out this week also to another wood turner, just because I thought the project he made this week was absolutely awesome. Carl Jacobson, the man's I don't know.
Who?
Can he? Yeah, exactly. Can he do anything that isn't good? Well,
yes.
We'll have Robin on and we'll find out the answer to that burning question. But he put a video out early this week. He did a wood turning on a natural edge lidded box, and it was really kind of cool. I like the way he did it. And I thought it was unique. So if you had the opportunity to check it out, I think he turned it out of maple burl, and I believe the finial he used African blackwood in it. But it turned out really cool, and it was worth watching because Carl's. I hate to admit it, but I like Carl.
Yeah,
Hashtag my idea.
It was real pretty.
It was
Hashtag
real pretty.
my idea.
Oh, there you go. Okay, great. Richard?
Well, I do have a shout out this week, but I don't know what the channel's called, and I don't know what the guy's called either. So you're going to have to rely on the links. The only reason is I don't speak Japanese, and I certainly cannot read or write Japanese, even though a lot of my handwriting could be misconstrued.
They'll turn in Japanese, I think.
So basically, this guy makes a router table. He uses a few draw slides and some bike brake cable, and he has like a little windy handle to make the router lift. It's quite an ingenious thing. It kind of piqued my interest rather than the stupid little windy handles that you see people using sometimes, and it just was more convenient. That was all. So check that out if you're thinking of modifying or making your new router table.
Yeah, it'll be the one written in Japanese in the description below, because I don't know how to pronounce either. And
what is our router?
Steve, you know what? You start singing the Vapors. You know what that song was about, right? I mean, just want to ask. Okay, all right, never mind.
Oh yeah.
All right. Anyway, well, you singing it to Richard kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Still a cool song. I don't care.
We started and ended on a good note, guys.
Yeah, exactly. We started. Thank you for bringing us way back down again. Richard, I guess it's time to go home. Let's do it.
I think it is. Are we going to do a kind of quick live just for our live listeners? Because we're not on Patreon, we don't do Patreon, but you can have a free anyway after party that's not really an after party that you have to pay for.
Well, we can. I mean, because to a lot of
I've got a question for Heidi that I didn't get a chance to ask.
and a lot of people that are out in the chat, didn't realize that the U.S. changed time, and so they missed. So yeah, we can stick around. Absolutely.
Rankers.
Excellent. So if you are still listening, thank you for still listening. If you're not, we'll say what we like about you. Until next week, when we've got another excellent guest on who is also from the art world. That's the official art world, not the self-proclaimed art world. So until then,
another friggin' snob.
Another snob. Have a great week, everybody.
See you later, everyone.
Say
Have
goodbye,
a
Steve.
fine evening.
Heidi, thank you for putting up with us.
Oh, my pleasure. It's so much fun.